Have you ever driven through a city and thought, wow, this place looks like time just stopped? Boarded up homes, rusting factories, empty streets that used to be packed with life? You're not imagining things. Some American cities, once full of people, jobs, and promise, are now shadows of their former selves. Today, we're exploring 5 of the most vacated cities in the United States. These aren't ghost towns in the desert or off-grid mountain outposts. These were thriving, industrial powerhouses, now scarred by abandonment, unemployment, and a painful history of decline. Let's uncover what happened, and why they may never recover. Number 5. Gary, Indiana. Gary might be the most haunting example of a once great American city brought to its knees by industry collapse. Founded in 1906 by U.S. Steel, Gary was once a booming steel town, the kind of place people moved to for opportunity. At its peak in the 1960s, Gary had nearly 180,000 residents. Today, that number has dropped to around 69,000, and still falling? What's left behind feels like a real-life urban time capsule. Roughly 40% of the city's buildings are vacant, crumbling, or overtaken by weeds. Entire neighborhoods are boarded up. It's so empty in places, you can hear your own footsteps echo on the street. The fall came fast. As steel production declined in the late 20th century, so did the jobs, and with them, the people. Gary became synonymous with crime, poverty, and decay. By the early 2000s, it was routinely ranked among the most dangerous and most miserable cities in America. But here's the twist. Gary's story isn't over. As of 2025, the city is back in the news for launching an ambitious revitalization campaign. A new mayor is investing in infrastructure cleanup, converting abandoned lots into green spaces, and trying to attract logistics and clean tech companies. There's even talk of turning parts of the city into film sets, because yes, it really does look post-apocalyptic. Still, the challenges are massive: pollution, poverty, corruption, and decades of underfunded services. But if it succeeds, Gary could become one of the country's most unexpected comeback stories. Gary stands as a stark reminder of what happens when a city bets everything on one industry, and what it takes to rise from the rubble. Number 4. Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown was once a booming steel town in the heart of Pennsylvania. But today, it's lost nearly 3/4 of its population, down 73.3% from its peak. This city actually has fewer people today than it did in 1890. Hard to believe, right? Back in the late 1800s, Johnstown was on the rise thanks to rich deposits of iron ore and coal. Its Cambria Iron Works made it a key player in the early Rust Belt economy. By 1920, the city hit its population peak, over 67,000 residents. It had steel, energy, and jobs. But it also had floods. Lots of them. The infamous Johnstown flood of 1889 killed over 2,000 people and became one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. Still, the town rebuilt. But what it couldn't rebuild from was the economic collapse that came later. In the 1970s, Bethlehem Steel, Johnstown's economic backbone, employed over 11,000 people. But as the steel industry crumbled, so did the city. Coal mines closed. Jobs vanished. There was no plan B today. Johnstown has fewer than 18,000 residents, and over 500 abandoned buildings. The infrastructure says, big city, but the population doesn't. It's isolated, underdeveloped, and sadly, unlikely to recover. Number 3. East St. Louis, Illinois. Just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri, sits a city that feels like a cautionary tale: East St. Louis. At its peak in 1950, it had over 82,000 residents. Today, just over 17,000 remain. That's a jaw-dropping 80% drop in population. How did it get here? In the late 1800s, East St. Louis was booming. It was a railroad terminus, a major coal hub, and a magnet for factories and meatpacking plants. From 1890 to 1910, the city's population quadrupled. Immigrants poured in. Businesses thrived. But underneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Racial tensions exploded in 1917, with one of the deadliest race riots in American history. Even so, the city kept growing, but the seeds of division and neglect were already planted. By the 1960s, the cracks widened. Manufacturing jobs vanished, businesses left. Crime skyrocketed. The once proud city became known more for violence than opportunity. Today, East St. Louis has nearly 700 abandoned homes and a 25% vacancy rate among all buildings. Aside from a riverfront casino, there's not much left of the economy. The infrastructure feels too big for the population. The silence feels heavy. This is a city that didn't just shrink, it imploded. Number 2. Youngstown, Ohio. Once a proud titan of American steel, Youngstown, Ohio now stands as one of the most haunting examples of industrial decline in the U.S. Located halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, this city was booming in the early 20th century. From just 2,700 residents in 1860 to over 170,000 by 1930, it was the kind of explosive growth you only see in cities built on steel, coal, and the American dream. At its height, Youngstown Sheet and Tube alone employed over 20,000 workers. The Mahoning Valley was lined with steel mills, and the skies above the city practically glowed with the heat of molten metal. It was loud, it was gritty, and it was alive. But by the 1970s, the steel industry, and Youngstown's future, began to crack. Then came Black Monday, 1977. In one day, over 5,000 jobs vanished when Youngstown Sheet and Tube closed its doors. It wasn't a slow bleed, it was a gaping wound. As factories shut down across the valley, the population plummeted. Entire neighborhoods emptied out. Homes were abandoned faster than the city could board them up. Since 2007, over 7,000 homes have been torn down in Youngstown. That's not counting the miles of brownfields and rotting steel structures that still sit like skeletons of the city's former life. Today, Youngstown has less than half its peak population. And while there's been talk of recovery, art spaces, tech hubs, downtown revitalization, the scars left by decades of loss are deep. This is what happens when a city builds everything on one industry, and that industry disappears. Number 1. Highland Park, Michigan. Just north of Detroit is a city with a story so extreme, it almost feels fictional, Highland Park. At one time, this place was a shining star of American industry. Both Ford and Chrysler made their mark here. In fact, Ford's legendary Highland Park plant once employed more workers than the city's entire population. Picture this. In 1900, Highland Park had just 427 residents. By 1920, that number had exploded to over 46,000. That's a 100-fold increase in 20 years, fueled by cars, factories, and the promise of a better life. But as fast as it rose, it fell even faster. The Ford plant closed in the 1970s. Chrysler stayed a while longer, but in 1992, they left too, moving their operations to suburban Auburn Hills. When they left, they took thousands of jobs and most of Highland Park's financial lifeline. The fallout? Devastating? By the early 2000s, the city's finances were so bad, the state of Michigan took control. And even that couldn't stop the bleeding. Today, Highland Park has just 8,443 residents, a drop of 84% from its peak. It's one of the most dangerous cities in the country, despite its small size. And the land? It's covered in over 1,000 empty lots, where homes, stores, and schools used to stand. You can still find some businesses here. Some signs of life. But Highland Park is no longer the powerhouse it once was. It's now a symbol, a warning, of what happens when prosperity isn't protected. My final thoughts: America is full of cities that once thrived, on steel, on cars, on coal and commerce. But times change, industries vanish. And if there's no backup plan, towns vanish with them. What's left behind isn't just empty buildings. It's ghosts of ambition, echoes of factory whistles, and streets that whisper stories of what once was. If you found this video insightful, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And tell us in the comments, which city surprised you the most? Thanks for watching.